dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
Welcome to Big Flying Lizards, a dragon movie and television podcast. I am your host, Bryce Wilson, and I am joined once again by the one and only Colby Ford, host of Rock, Paper, Science and Dungeon Master Extraordinaire. Colby, how we doing?
Doing pretty good. I mean, extra hour of sleep for everybody last night just makes the world a kinder place, right?
I know. I woke up at 11 a.m. yesterday. I woke up early yesterday.
Yeah, sounds early.
Well, I mean, considering I stayed up till 3 a.m.-ish on Halloween, I was still recovering from all of that. Which, although, so happy Halloween, all my spooky ones out there. That hopefully everyone stayed safe and a good time. And also, just sort of in theme, I really think these next 3 episodes are in the spooky theme over here, Colby.
Very, very fitting. This is some creepy shit.
It is some creepy shit, and even though I've seen the show before, I think it's the gods heard me saying that I wanted more darkness. I wanted it to have a serious tone. And Matt Mercer came down and was like, "Say less, boy." Boom, dark.
That's what you get.
Yeah, careful what you ask for. But in case those of you have not picked up, we are going to be discussing season 1, episode. Sorry, I have a little gremlin that wants to sit on my lap.
Olive, come.
Yes, the pups are going to be doing podcasting with us today.
Olive, come here.
There is my goblin. Here is Goblin. Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes, there's the Olive.
There she is.
Hey, Olive, you're famous.
What's that?
I can't look at the screen.
Is that the cursor? Are we obsessed with little moving dots?
Bright lights. I like those. But speaking of bright lights and cursors and everything, we are going to be discussing Critical Role's Legend of Vox Machina, Season 1, Episodes 4, 5, and 6. Similar to last week, we're going to be discussing episode by episode, and we're going to first cover Episode 4, which is Shadows at the Gates. Before we get diving in, is there anything that you want to just bring up about this episode in particular, Colby?
I mean, the first time I watched this, and like the second and third time I watched this show, this is where the show starts to hit.
Yes.
It kind of doesn't stop.
There's going to be significant less complaints in this episode, I'm feeling. Of course, I'm a cynical man, so of course there will still be some complaints because there's no making me happy. But but I think that this is really where if you like if you're like me and you can't get down with the goofy humor as much as you'd like, this is where it really gets spicy. The funny thing is Ramsey.
Yeah, somebody's moving out across the hallway from us, and they're working on the carpet in there. So it's nonstop pounding. That's not going to be the last time. I'm sorry to say it.
That's unacceptable that they be.
Oh, I know. People existing, pounding in her territory? Absolutely not.
She pissed all over the place, and she earned the right.
This is hers.
Well, speaking of this is hers and houses, let's just dive right on into house arrest in the episode. After the disastrous banquet, Sovereign Uriel orders Vox Machina arrested. The reasonable Lady Alora intervenes, convincing Uriel to place them under house arrest in their own keep instead of the dungeon. The party examines the dark tome Vax stole from the Briarwoods. Percy opens up about his past and his vendetta. Vex makes him promise not to keep any more secrets, unaware of his deal with the devil for his guns. As Captain Jarrett and his guards secure the keep, Scanlan and Vax are trying to translate the book, sharing rapid-fire exchanges of middle fingers in frustration. Delilah Briarwoods sends a spectral wraith to retrieve her book, which fades through the walls, and their presence is heralded by nothing scarier than the guards being killed off-screen. So, right off the top, it's both very similar to what actually goes on in Critical Role and what doesn't go on in Critical Role. Because if I understand it correctly, the book that's just like repurposed, like not even necessarily used in Critical Role whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But while they were all under house arrest, they were attacked by these demons, by these just what were they?
Um, I
Were they
I
actually
can't remember
ghosts?
for sure. They could have been like shadow demons. They could have been ghosts, wraith, specters. There's a whole gamut. But as usual, if they've been stripped of their anything recognizable from D&D. I mean, honestly, the way that the fight plays out, the light mechanic being so important is like super cool.
Yeah.
But like, can you imagine if you said, "Oh, you just need light to fight these things"? Like, how quickly your players would solve that?
Well, you say that, but also, Colby, you of all people know that D&D players are the worst at solving
Fair.
riddles.
Mm-hmm.
You could literally have the riddle spelled out there and it will take 20 years.
It's impossible. Literally impossible.
Um, but I also really do enjoy that we're getting more and more of the backstory of Percy. And I feel like I am definitely not alone in saying this, but Percy was probably one of my favorite characters in campaign 1. Like they're all great. Like don't get me wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but especially during this arc, Percy was just such a fascinating character. And I don't know if that's just because we as people are just naturally drawn to these, I don't want to even say morally gray characters because he's
Mm-hmm.
not. He is evil. Like as
Mm-hmm.
much as I love
At
Percy,
least right now, he's in a really dark place,
yeah,
and he's
there
letting it happen.
he's leaning full in. And for example, there's somebody who did a breakdown of Taliesin as a D&D player, and he just showed the reflections of his two characters that by the time that they made the video, which was Mollymock and Percy. And they were saying that Percy is somebody who's actually, and maybe this is not necessarily fair, but it was saying Percy is somebody who is naturally evil, but is doing it like trying to put on a facade of good. While
Mm-hmm.
Molly Mock is somebody who's naturally good, who's not necessarily putting on a facade of evil, but just putting on a facade of somebody who does not follow the rules or follows the stereotypical. And as much as I want to disagree and say that Percy's not evil, and he's made by his environment, he goes pretty evil in these 3
Yeah.
episodes in particular.
Yeah, and so like I mean this is such a fun character trope that this is what every 14-year-old's first like D&D character that they built themselves looks like. It's just this is how it looks when it's executed well. He's got the backstory of an anime protagonist and a gun that barely works. But when it works it really does, and
Yeah.
they picked the right moments to harvest from the live play,
Yes.
shooting off, people's hands in particular.
Mhm.
But yeah, his backstory, I think, summary or like montage is handled really well in a very anime protagonist way. Kind of gives this whole story something to center around where yeah, I think otherwise this show could have been really disconnected and all over the place.
Yeah. And I don't even want this to come across as any criticism, but like one thing that I would have just done a little different, and I would love your opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things that goes on in the Harry Potter live action films is when they tell the story of the three brothers and the Deathly Hollows. They switch to an animation. It's almost
Yes.
like a puppetry. I would have almost wished, as Percy was recounting, that they would have changed up the animation style a little bit. Just
Yeah.
one to be, I don't want to say not giving the proper recount, but it's going strictly from Percy's point of view. And I'm not even saying that he gave the wrong point of view, but I would have loved to just make that distinction that you're going back
Hmm.
in time. Again, maybe they're like, maybe they're just assuming like, hey, no, it's too complicated, too much. But I would have
Hmm.
loved just at least a little bit of a distinction showing that this is the past in a
Yeah.
memory.
I absolutely agree with you. I think they could have done more there. They gave us kind of a montage with a little bit of vignette, like darkening at the corners and some depth of field stuff and more stills. But yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking of like the intro to Sinners with the like woodcut animation. That's a chance to do something really different. And it's also a place where you want your viewers like really glued to the screen anyway. I do think that the point comes across, like
Yes, it
the
definitely
point
does.
absolutely comes across, that he is very angry and arguably has every right to be. Like, I can't
And
say that had I gone through this fantastical anime protagonist scenario, I can't say I would be any different than him. But
for sure. Well, and again, like I'm just thinking this as well. And again, I'd love your input on this. In the campaign, I distinctly remember Taliesin as Percy saying that he can't remember his parents' faces or he can't remember his siblings' faces, but he'll always remember the mole on Ripley's face, the fangs. Like, I would have almost loved if like all of his family members' faces were like a little blurry
yeah,
during that. Again, like it would have just add that emotional weight of like how much he's just dedicated towards violence and revenge rather than like justice, because that's what it is. And I'm pretty sure he says that several times, like he's after vengeance, he's not after any sense of justice.
yeah, and the evil that the Briarwoods are doing that we see later, and this show definitely wants us to think that they're evil villains, of course. But there's almost a different world where they could have shown up in Whitestone, found out that the Briarwoods are actually good rulers, and that could have led to a very different story, a very morally gray kind of thing. But
Could you imagine they show up and Percy's like, we gotta kill them, and they're like, and we just institute today universal basic income for everybody. Your
exactly.
benefit.
Oh, you've come to kill the lords? Well, there are no lords here. It's all collective rule.
We are more keepers of the castle overseeing the ziggurat.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like there's a D&D campaign out there where that is great fun to
Yeah.
like muck around in those. I really do think that the Mighty Nine and the Legend of Vox Machina, as it's almost its own style, even compared to other Critical Role stuff, because it's the characters are so archetypical, and backstories are very archetypical, and the best stuff that we get out of it, the reason people fell in love with this is more for I think again the execution more than the originality. And yeah, in I can't remember when, but like we start seeing these one-on-one moments. Well, I mean, it's ever so slightly contrived how Jarrett, or who's the captain? Anyway, the captain like
Yes.
splits them up, two in this room, two in this room. Great storytelling moment, because you have a chance for these um really talented actors to see how in this moment, how does Pike bounce off, how do Keyleth and Percy get along, and again kind of starting to show us the depth of feeling in these characters, even though they are stereotypes. They are they're ripped from other books, other media, but they're just so heartfelt
They
that it ends
are.
up working a lot better.
And every single one of the characters, I mean, like I said earlier, there are really no weak links. Like to say there's no weak moments, like that's, I mean, like I've said before, there's always going to be weak moments. Like I've definitely played characters that have had weak moments, but anybody that has said that there's any bad characters in Critical Role, like I think they're just they're just haters. Like,
Yeah.
again, like, you can hate moments, you can hate decisions, but to say that any of them are bad
Hmm.
characters is, 1, just wrong,
Yeah.
and 2, I think, again, they're just wanting to dive into that negativity.
Yeah. I mean, the moment that I love the most and happens to be on my screen anyway is just Pike talking to Grog. And that's where you can see how a really, simple character concept can become really deep when you know how they relate together. It's not, the originality of your character that's important. It's how they deal with each other, and Grog showing that moment of vulnerability when he can't figure out how to help Pike. That's huge. That's not something that most people would think to throw into their 6 intelligence barbarian, you know?
And that's an aspect that I'm glad that they decided to
Yeah.
keep showing, because that was
Yeah.
very much part of their relationship. Like, one of my favorite moments, and it's such a small moment, but one of my favorite moments in the campaign is when Pike teaches Grog how to read. Like,
Yeah.
it's just such a
Yeah.
it's a tender moment, and, like, you don't really ever experience that in D&D in general, and it's just, one, to show their
Hmm.
type of relationship, and it's also just hilarious because you see this madman of a monster.
Who just got done spitting out the ashes of her dead ancestors. Like, just played off a really dumb joke, and then it can switch lanes. We've said it in the last episode that this show can feel a little bit over condensed at times, but it pulls off those joke to tender moment transitions really, really well.
Yeah.
That's just
I
good direction.
It really is. One of the characters I feel like is very almost perfectly balanced with this, and what we've seen, at least in these 3 episodes, was Vax. Like, you see that level of joke. Like, I still love the moment where they're just doing their flipping off right there. Like, it's so stupid, but, like, again, like, everybody wants to point to Liam being the emo goth boy who's just always moping and sad, but, like, that's just not who Vax was. Like,
Yeah.
Vax was a lot more complicated. Like, yes, Caleb was the sad boy. Caleb was the
Mm-hmm.
sad the
Mm-hmm.
entire time, but Vax was joking around, and I know we talked about this last time, and I love to be able to see that level of just dedication. And just on the subject of Vax real quick, again, I know I mentioned this last week, but I just wanted to really dive in because I think in this episode we got all that we were supposed to get from the conversation in the campaign of when Liam as Vax brought it up and said we should leave. We're not connected to these people at all. Like, some of them legitimately hate us. Why are we staying here? But in
Yeah.
this, it's Vex who's like, "Hey, we could escape here. Like, this is not our problem. Like, we were good alone before. Might as well leave
Mm-hmm.
again." Like, and it was Vax who had to talk her into staying.
Yeah.
And again, I like that they at least had something there, but I really still wish that was such a pivotal moment, especially with the timing of when it was
Yeah.
actually happening.
Yeah.
And I wish that they would have saved it there rather than given it at this moment. Because again, like, I'm not saying this as like, it's not that it wasn't powerful that they decided to stay, but
Mm-hmm.
again, I feel like it just was so much more powerful later down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I mean, it's always a struggle in anything like this to control how and when you reveal information. That's storytelling.
Come on.
Coming up with the information is kind of the easy part. Figuring out how best to relay it. I honestly don't remember when in the live play they had that conversation. Were they like already on the way to the Briarwoods, or
It was literally right before the Chroma Conclave attacked Amon. They were literally like an hour away from leaving.
yeah.
Because if you go into the actual video, there's a timestamp. They're like, "Oh, buddy, you'll know why you're together. Just wait." And on the Talks Machina on that episode, Matt was invited, And Matt was like, yeah, I was so happy you had that conversation. But I was also like, guys, just you want a purpose? You want a reason to be there? Just you wait. You're getting one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of like that. There's a standard mechanism when it comes to these kind of stories, which is that everybody kind of creates their character that they're interested in, that they like. And in this case, and in basically every like person's D&D campaign out there, the characters you end up with are not people who would likely care to be together. And so you've always got to be answering that question, like, if these two characters are twins, if they value their self-sufficiency so much, they should be talking about, like, why don't we leave? This isn't our business. It obviously, like, will change. They will get more of a personal stake in it. Vax will end up, feeling more personally invested in the Chroma Conclave, and, he gets his mission from the Raven Queen and all of that. But for now, he's a thief. And Vex is a ranger, and she kind of likes Percy. You start to see it here, but hardly. It's just barely like a twinkle in the eye, or like the moment where they're on the wagon together and they just have a quick conversation. And yeah, Vex and Vax don't seem to have much of a stake here until you start to see how they're, I don't know, they're sort of like, they're giving it a try, sticking around. You can tell that both of them are like, well, we've done this a lot of times. We could just leave. We could just fuck right off.
I could just walk away.
Yeah. Especially after getting Wraith hands through my chest and black goo spilling out of my eyes, ears, and mouth.
Speaking of which, let's go ahead and dive into that a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
The team is disarmed and helpless. Their weapons are useless. Pike cannot connect to her deity. In a defiant to end the moment, as the Wraith lift Grog, a powerless Pike leaps and holds onto him and spits in the Wraith's face. Just when all seems lost, Keyleth creates a miniature sun in her hands, banishing the magical darkness and forcing the Wraiths to become tangible. In a shocking beat, both sides realize the Wraiths can now be hurt, but are stronger than they look and require a massive amount of damage to be destroyed. The fight becomes brutal, close-quartered brawl, Percy showing he is stronger than he looks. Body slams one into the beam. The team ends up as a bloody, splattered warriors covered with the Wraith's black goo. With the Wraiths defeated, Jarrett's men dead, and the captain now a reasonable authority figure, rearms Vox Machina and allows them to leave to uncover the Briarwoods plot. Stays behind to seek her patron. And again, like, it is just, I'll talk about what I think about Pike's whole arc in this season a little bit, but I do like that it is one of those things where we had literally just had the conversation that Percy was talking with Keyleth, where Keyleth is trying to like relate to Percy and saying that she's going through her armamente. She doesn't know if she's worthy to complete it to rule her people. And so that's just a fear that she has. And this is like her moment to shine, and no pun intended with the sun. Like,
Yeah.
and I also do like that it wasn't just she created the sun and they get destroyed. It was like, okay, now you actually still have to.
Yeah, now you can fight them. Yeah.
Which it did become like one of the most brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, there's particularly that one shot looking up at Percy as he just like stomps. Yeah. Absolutely brutal. Almost as brutal as Grog just like ripping off the top of one of their head. But like that's what Grog enjoys. This is that we're getting to see that Percy is being, he's angry enough that he's not afraid of getting his clothes dirty.
Somehow.
Which is actually new. Like, if this was somebody's first look at Vox Machina, they would be like, holy shit, look at this hoity-toity noble guy curb stomping this undead creature. And it's starting to reinforce what he's going to become.
Yes.
And I mean, I also really like his interactions with Keyleth here, because they, that's the wavelength where they tend to get along all throughout the storyline, all throughout the campaign. They're both people who have important stations already thrust upon them, and they're trying to figure that out. But it also kind of shows that Percy's not in a place to understand his own friends here. He's kind of using them. They're bodyguards for him in his vengeance quest, and he's starting to realize that he might like one or two of them.
Hey, their secrets are safe with his indifference.
Exactly.
Which it is interesting because somebody made the comment that Keyleth and Percy are like two sides of the same coin, where Percy is always going to be the more cynical and just the more just, I don't want to say evil, but just the darker road. And Keyleth will always see the good and try to take that higher road. Like, people try to say that Keyleth is a true neutral character, but I don't see it. Like, I've never saw her as a true neutral character. Even at the end of the show, when she tries to be, when she not when she tries, but when she does become the chief of her people, I don't even see her as a true neutral character then. Like, I see
no. And that's kind of a way in which Exandria is a different world than others. The Ashari have this special place, guarding the world from the elemental evils. And so they do end up, well, I think you could make a case that the whole alignment thing goes out the window more so than it usually does with Exandria. Even with games in Exandria, it's kind of hard to throw characters into that 3x3 chart when so much of the content out there, with this likely being their simplest story. And when we get into Mighty Nine, things get more complex and a little bit more political and nuanced. And again, those good, evil, law, chaos ideas don't work so well.
Well, so this whole alignment conversation has just brought up a conversation that I've heard both sides, and just, I'd love your opinion on it. Excuse me. In this campaign, not right now, and this doesn't actually get shown, but Matt moves Vex's character from being like a neutral good to like a neutral evil, or I don't know the exactly, but he moved her alignment, and she took it and was like actually very upset about. Like, again, like, you will never hear her say anything, but you can tell from her body language, how she reacted and the things that she was doing, that she was upset about that. And there's a lot of people that say that Matt shouldn't have done that because that's taking away her agency to control that. I sort of land on the side of like, okay, if you're a player who's wanting to, I don't even want to say pretend, but you're wanting to portray your character in a certain way, but you're still acting in these other ways, I think it's the DM has every right to just say, hey, yeah, you're not lawfully good right now. You've been acting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like this is one of those times where, I think it's more about how Matt said it than what he said. And like I've done kind of the same thing and said, oh, you're going to have an alignment shift, because that's a really important thing in previous editions. An alignment shift for a paladin in second edition that's the end of your character. That's it. But I think what he was trying to do there is to say like, hey, you might want to look at some of your character's actions a little bit more objectively. Saying like your alignment has shifted, at least the way I play with alignment, I would never say that, because I prefer to think of alignment as descriptive, not prescriptive. Like, your character just did a chaotic evil thing because you just caused pain for your own enjoyment. That doesn't mean that's all your character can ever do.
Yeah.
But, we've inherited this history of the alignment system, alignment charts, the roots of which most people who play D&D don't know. But it's an interesting idea, and it memes very well.
Well, And how I particularly feel as well is it's sort of hard as a ranger to really narratively explain how your alignment has shifted because again, uh, I the only reason that I necessarily even fight on the side of Matt is because if you want to like consider yourself a good character or like it's like saying that you're a good person when you're constantly like causing pain and suffering to other people. It's like a level of hypocrisy. And so and it's so hard to do that for a ranger in particular because one moment that I actually really loved when you were a DM and I really recognize now that Brant was not in alignment of a paladin. He was solely seeking out money. He was like
Hmm.
unnecessarily killing people and torturing people. And it was like you took away my ability to use any powers or anything. And that was like a real wake up call for myself and for
Hmm.
Brant as well. And so I made some alignment shifts and, you know, casually cut off my own hand. And, you know, that's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you showed Brant, and that makes for a really good story. You know, showing a character who realizes that they've crossed a line, and now they feel they need to atone. I think that's a great story to tell. But like, you know, even had we played the same, you know, situation, same character now, I might have, you know, communicated it differently. I would have tried to set up a situation where either the party has an important contact they need to work with, or somehow the perspectives and viewpoints of other people living in the world could come to the forefront. And then I could, you know, through those NPCs, show that, you know, people are starting to react to you like you're becoming evil, rather than saying, hey, your alignment is now evil. You have to play that now. Good luck. Which I think is what Matt was looking for, is just accountability for what Vex was doing, and showing that you know is going to have an effect on your character. But he was using like second edition verbiage for it.
yes. Which I think that's just the big thing that we have to keep reminding ourselves is that V is still brand new to them. They are still like, even though at this point they're only 36 episodes in, like 36 sessions in
Mm-hmm.
to V. And I mean, I love 5e. I know that you have a mixed relationship, mixed feelings on 5e.
Complicated.
And it's oh, my executive producer is modding back up.
Uh,
But like that's like I also understand that it's so much harder because I think Vex like Laura is a brand new player. She may have more exposure, but this is the first real campaign that she has played, and it might be just a little challenging to because like I think something that we all have suffered from at one point in a time is even though we're in this game trying to role play and trying to experience it, it's so easy to just be like, oh, this is make believe. I can do whatever I want. And you just
mm-hmm.
take that and run with it. And you treat it as if it's GTA 5 over here.
Yeah, well, and I think that, like, oh my god, I'm blanking on every name right now. But anyway, with Orion at the time, you know, their game was a little bit more like they were just messing around. They were playing Pathfinder. They had characters that worked very differently. They played them up to a pretty high level in
Yeah.
one system where things work one way, and then they had to make that switch, and you see the friction that caused in a lot of places, like Vex always going off on his own. I mean, Vax always going off on his own.
Yeah.
Get all
And
of us.
also, I also, and I mean, I don't think this is the episode where we should really dive into it because I think that there's going to be better points too. But like, just seeing the complications that Marissa went through with Keyleth as a druid because I don't know how druids are in Pathfinder. I never played them, but I'm still convinced that druid is one of the most difficult classes to play
It is.
in 5e.
It 100% always has been and still is. And, you know, that's not to say that it's an easy class to play in Pathfinder, even compared to other Pathfinder classes. She was working with just a lot of abilities. And you can, you know, especially early on in the stream, you can see a lot of friction coming from like, hey, you gotta like really pay attention to what the rules of the spell, not just its title, because 5e doesn't care what the title says the spell does.
Exactly.
And a lot of their early struggles come from these very sudden changes and trying to translate characters. And poor Trinket is who gets the worst of this transition, because he turns into literally a joke that he can never actually come along on an adventure because he's useless and Laura's too afraid to risk him.
Which I do think this is a great point. The most unrealistic, inaccurate part of this entire show in all things is when Vex says, "No, Trinket, you need to stay here." I'm like,
Yeah.
no, we know that is not what went down.
Yeah.
Vex, why are you lying to us over here, rewriting history?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, animal companions worked different in Pathfinder. We're more powerful, we're more useful, we're more permanent. And 5e kind of treats them as like, hey, you want to do an extra d6 of damage? Yeah, that's what you get.
I think they're amazing for like the first 5 or 7 levels, but after that, they're like moot.
Yeah, there's hardly any scaling. They've worked hard to try and improve that with the 2024 rules, but it's still one of the lot of different classes have a version of the character trope of like, my character isn't just me, it's me and my little buddy. You've got Fern in their campaign 3 and little Mister, the fire monkey that throws fire poop. You've got warlocks with their familiars. You've got wizards with their familiars. Druids and rangers can get beast companions in various ways. But even the ones that are fairly well balanced, like the Drake Warden Ranger. I don't know how deeply you've looked into it. It's a cool concept. It's basically like you are a ranger that works with dragons. You have this Drake that follows you around. You can command it in battle. In higher levels, you can get on its back and fly around. So it's promising that fantasy of like, it's more about the team, me and my buddy, me and my mount. And even then, I've got one of those characters in my current campaign, and the player has complained sometimes that like, what's it really add? Like, until you hit, I think it's like level 14, which we've established is not a commonly played level, before you can get on and fly around. Like, yeah.
I mean, it's so much. I feel like, and maybe this is, I feel like the Ranger class is strictly almost just a roleplay heavy class when it's really not supposed to be a roleplay heavy class. Because again, I would love to just as a character have a dragon that's just following me around. Like that is like, I mean, how many characters have I given you, Colby, that their dream and mission is to find a dragon egg? Like that is the only thing that they're trying to do. Even when it doesn't make any sense for the character, like this is a monk from the mountains. He's a child. What does he want? He wants a dragon egg.
Why? Why not?
Do you not want a dragon?
But it's what it comes down to is it's a consequence of trying of D&D's kind of split goals. It 5th edition has never been quite sure, what it wants to be the best at. There's lots and lots of ways that you could frame this, but I think that in trying to break everything down into action economy, turn economy, damage types, and movement types, and all of the rules that make the tactics work, and feel exciting and interesting and whatnot, you lose some of the capability for rangers to ever show up as this like strong archetype. And so they end up feeling kind of watered down. They've got a lot of little things. Most of them, why not just play a fighter? Or why not just play a druid?
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have the same problem with the paladin. You could say that the paladin is why not just play a fighter or why not just play a cleric? but it never feels that way. A paladin is very clearly a different thing.
It's because Paladin's the best class, Colby.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of. I'll echo something that a lot of people on the internet have said, is that the actual only problem with the Ranger class in 5e is that they don't have a good idea of what the specific fantasy is that they're trying to hit. To what extent is it Aragorn? To what extent is it Drizzt? If you want the Aragorn or Drizzt or whatever other fantasy, then you kind of have to set the campaign up to supply that rather than it, being something that can come from the character. And so it's completely on the GM to make that fantasy happen.
So this is just coming to me because I really enjoyed them when I was younger, but did you ever read the Ranger Apprentice books?
Ranger's Apprentice.
So it's a young adult series where I think that it is most like a D&D Ranger that I've ever seen. And it's a long, long series, and it's pretty much just this, it follows the storyline of a kid who wanted to be a knight, but he got recruited to be a ranger's apprentice instead of a knight's apprentice. And he pretty much learns that rangers are like the Swiss Army knives of the military, where they're like, they have one, like they're sort of good at everything, but they specialize in shooting bows. But they have to learn how to trap, they have to learn how to hunt, they have to learn how to hide and sneak around, and they're a little bit better than like a typical archer, but not by much. And it's just really fascinating to see, because it does come down to a point where they go to this one military where they have no archers at all, and all of a sudden they're just a god because of that.
Yeah.
And if you haven't checked out the Ranger's Apprentice books, those were some fun books that I read when I was younger. I don't know how much they would hold up now, but
yeah, but another thing that I will say about V is that what it comes to, I could say the same thing about the Ranger as many other aspects of 5e, in that V games can be very, very good. The player facing stuff is excellent. And in most things, it achieves that by dumping a lot on the GM. To set up situations where a ranger is going to matter. You can say, I can make an urban bounty hunter ranger. Yeah, well, it's still on your GM to make sure that, okay, there's an urban situation for you to be in, and bounty hunting to be done, and tracking along the rooftops. And so while, a monk can bring this very strong flavor to everything they do, whether it's combat or magic or whatever, whether the mechanics are good or not, you know what a monk is, and you can tell which one's the monk. But if 3 characters are shooting bows, what is there to tell you which one is the ranger? Yeah, so it's kind of like weak characterization on the game's part. Or, I don't know, maybe a ranger is an archetype that they shouldn't try to build a class around.
It's a dying breed.
Draw Steel doesn't have one.
Well, I do want to get into episode 5, but I do want to just ask you this question, because it is one that I have been wondering for a while. Do you think of all the additions from Dungeons and Dragons, like, I'm sure that there's other game styles completely separate from Dungeons and Dragons that is a lot easier, but do you think he puts the most stress or most strain on the DM? Or do you think that how do you think it does the balance of like, hey, this is the DM's role versus this is what the game is actually putting forth, or
Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways in which he rests a lot on the DM duct taping things together and figuring out how to make things work, rather than supplying things that work at the outset. I mean, obviously, you can change any game into anything you want if you're willing to homebrew it. When you're running campaigns really, really long term, like me, like Matt Mercer, I don't blame him for wanting to be a player in their new campaign.
Don't blame him at all.
I mean, he did so well with 3 campaigns because he was constantly making his own shit. he was constantly making up his own monsters with his own instincts on how difficult they should be, making his own missteps. And I don't think it's an inherently bad thing to get anyone who runs any RPG used to, here are ways that I can bend the system to make it do what I want. But I do think that it's more like Wizards of the Coast leans on the DMs rather than the system leaning on the DMs. They just kind of don't bother themselves with making things that work within the game's balance. And so you kind of always have to keep up with it, and you always have, like, every time a new book comes out, new spells come out, and it's suddenly all available for my players. I'm like, Fairy Toast? What's Fairy Toast? Turns out it's the best spell in 5e right now.
Fairy Toast.
Fairy Toast.
I will make sure to go and ban that from my players.
Yes. It's incredible. It's an incredible spell, and it can be so broken. And you just kind of have to know that stuff, or expect that stuff, or get used to just like, and I think this is what actually ends up happening is most people just kind of get used to rolling with the punches. Like, yeah, that encounter didn't go the way I thought because, shit, I forgot one of them can fly.
It's like, God damn it, they had pack tactics. Shit.
Exactly. And it can be something even simpler than that just upends things and can very easily make encounters feel just completely useless, trivial. Yeah,
for sure. Well, if it's all right with you, I'd love to get this rolling and going.
Get me off this 5 before I go down this rabbit hole for an hour.
And cut. Just kidding. All righty. Episode 5, Fate's Journey. The group visits Gilmore's Glorious Goods. They buy expensive vampire-slaying supplies, and Gilmore foreshadows that the vampires are weakened but not killed by sunlight. Vax and Keyleth begin to bond, much to Vex's annoyance, who reminds her brother that they need to stick together as twins. On the road, the group shares stories of their strangest kills, a mythological gag from the original stream. Grog tells of ripping out the tongue of a monster, Keyleth of a lava death, Vax of killing a Rakshasa, Scanlan of a story of a coitus interrupted by a disgusting monster, and the mood is shattered when Percy coldly reminds them that the real monsters are at Whitestone, which Grog refers to him as a buzzkill. And I do want to first preface, because I'm going to make a comment later. I might make the comment after this, but I did really enjoy when they're sitting there reminiscing about the monsters that they've, because we get the Underdark. We get that Underdark.
Yeah, this is something that everyone who runs any RPG should be doing, is like, be as artificial as you have to, but say they were on a long trip and you're not wanting to do the whole travel mechanics and how many miles do you go each day. Just montage that kind of thing by saying, oh, you all are sitting around the fire one night. The topic of your strangest kills comes up. Who's got an idea of what their character would say? Be funny, be ridiculous, show us something about your character. This is a moment where this is one of those fun little DM moments where you can say, like, okay, players, go. And if you're doing really well as a DM, you pay attention. You take notes.
You're like, oh, that's a great storyline to be brought up later.
Exact. Oh, that thing that can come back to life somehow? You say you killed that? Interesting.
Well, I love though you said that, because I will go back through my TikTok and find the account, but there was this one TikTok account that was giving a recommendation that before every session, you as a DM should pose either a question or a situation where the players just answer it as their characters. And it's a way for you to like really immerse yourself in like, because I'm sure that you've experienced where you're like, okay, we need to separate, like we're playing, we need to separate from real life and go. But this is like a good way to like ease in and be like, okay, so you guys are sitting there, you're reminiscing. What is your favorite story involving the beach that involves your characters? And you go around, you're like, well, Brant remembers taking his children to the beach once, and he like, and again, like, just goes around and it helps just like, okay, how would my character think? How would my character get that? And it's something that's little to no stakes, and it just makes it so you get into the mindset of your character. And also, as you mentioned, Colby, if you're a good DM,
Yeah. Exactly. This is where your players are giving you the daggers that you're going to stab in their back later.
Brant loves his children, get rid of children.
Children, you say? Let me check my lines and veils. Ah, dang it.
I said that earlier about how I mean I said that I love that they are reminiscing and telling almost these inside jokes of what's going on in the campaign. But something that I have been noticing in the show, and again, like, I understand why they're doing it, and I can't be mad that they're doing it, but I feel like the show tries to do too many inside jokes about what goes on in Critical Role. Now, I don't know, that could strictly just be a marketing scheme where they're trying to get people to come and actually watch Critical Role, but I feel like with almost half of them, the show would be almost better off not having those references, or just not having them being so slapping you on the head with
Right.
it.
Right. It is such a hard line for them to walk here because there is so much of this, like, all there are so many hundreds of hours of inside jokes. And moments like this are the only time when you can work some of those in. And they do. Of the stories they tell, the only one that's not actually from the actual play is Scanlan's sex story, which is again just setting up how much of a weird little perv Scanlan is, which is basically kind of, it seems like all he gets this season until the Scanbo incident. We get more later, but like it's in joke 1, in joke 2, in joke 3 Scanlan, which is kind of his own in joke. And I do think it is a little bit much. Like, I found that I enjoy some of them, and I'm sure this is the same for writing any kind of comedy. Some jokes are just going to land and some aren't. And any kind of comedy show is going to have more jokes than are going to land with everybody. But yeah, I do think that they maybe tried a little bit too hard for some of those inside
Well,
jokes.
and one of them in particular that just stood out to me is in this Gilmore shopping scene. Vax is over there looking at everything while they broke in, and he's like, dagger, dagger, dagger. I'm like, oh, we all know what you're doing there. We all know what you're. And again, like,
Yeah.
I know that it's iconic because that's what do you do? Dagger, dagger, dagger.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, especially in just this context, like, it just seems like they were literally at a drawing board, like, well, we have to say dagger, dagger, dagger. We have to have Vax say, how do we get him to do it so it doesn't sound corny? And I almost would have rather him just like, as he's like, he's fighting drunk or something, and he's like, dagger, dagger, dagger. Like,
Uh-huh.
again, like,
Yeah.
it would have made more sense to me rather than just him just scrolling right there.
Yeah, I mean, this is I mean, even just interpersonally, this is how an inside joke can be good or bad. You know, if an inside joke is really good, you tell it to somebody who doesn't understand what's going on, and they can see why it's there. They can see why it's interesting before they know why it's a joke. Just having Liam O'Brien say dagger, dagger, dagger means something to all of the people who know, but absolutely nothing to everybody else. And like, in my experience watching other shows where I don't have this background context, those I can always feel when those moments are happening. I'm like, we're really focusing on something here. I don't get why. For what it is, it doesn't stand on its own.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a great example of like that really didn't do much entirely on its own.
And again, I don't want to be the one who's just pooing on everyone's parade over here, but at the same time, like, if you're trying to bring more people into the community and get them invested in Critical Role, and again, they're all professionals. They're all in this industry, so maybe they know something I don't. But like, I feel like that just is alienating to people. And again, like, maybe this is not the right point, but I feel like there's several instances where you're like, what's going on here? I feel like I'm missing something because there's just missing context. And again, like it's not the end of the world. This is one of my favorite episodes. I just felt like I needed to
Yeah.
bring this up.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right because there's other gags that happen in that same scene, like with Keyleth getting her fingers stuck in the funny little finger trap. I mean, that has another job because that's characterization for Keyleth. She's obviously got power. Everything we see her do at any point when she does anything other than act, bumbling is pretty crazy and extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so, this is another chance for them to do some characterization, to establish that like she feels lost in this world and is constantly on her back foot because she doesn't have this confidence. She's not from here, and that affects her. I mean, that's obviously kind of Keyleth's entire thing, and I like how it comes off in this show better than it did in the actual play, because we didn't get a lot of signs that Marisha was in on the joke. And a lot of the community didn't realize that this was intentional. She was acting. And they were like, oh my God, Marisha sucks at everything. Why is she so confused all the time?
Thanks, Marisha. Thanks, Keyleth.
Yeah.
No, and
yeah.
it definitely, I do think that you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head where you're just seeing that derpiness. And Marisha has said in Talks Machina and then in other interviews that she has such a personal love for Avatar The Last Airbender, which if you've seen the show and you don't, then what's wrong with you?
It's one of the finest pieces of media to come out in the last 20 years. Full stop.
It's considered one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and I
Absolutely.
will not be fighting that. I will not be arguing against that.
Avatar's worst episode is better than so much that comes out.
Exactly. But and she was really like inspired, and it's really important to her, so she decided to base that character around that, and you can really see that with the four elements. She even Keyleth as a character has a lot of similarities to Aang if you like really look at it, where there's a lot of just she's the hero, she's supposed to save the world just like Aang was supposed to save the world, but they're both just feel the pressure and the weight and just don't think they're ready and don't think they're worthy. And they both also are sort of vegan.
Yeah, a little naive, like out of place, and like cute in their own way, but again, naive. Keyleth and Pike are always the voices for like, hey, what if we tried to do something because it was good sometimes?
There was like,
when everybody around them are hardened, like messed up mercenaries.
Yeah.
And robbers and psychotic ex nobility and whatnot. So like it's a great trope. I still feel like the community did Marisha Ray really dirty with like early reactions to how Keyleth was, and it took a long time for that to stop. But at the same time, there's also a lesson there that there are some personality traits that kind of don't come through in every kind of media.
Again, I want to have this conversation at length at a later time when an episode really does tie to Keyleth. But I do just want to say, and again, like I hope this does not come across as me blaming Marisha at all, but I am convinced that if she would have known her spells better in those first episodes, I don't think the hatred of Keyleth for being a naive character would have been reflected on Marisha, because she was playing a naive character, but then she also just didn't know her own spells that well. So it just sort of reflected in a way. And again, like all of it's unacceptable. I'm not sitting here defending it by any means, but I would love to be in that alternative universe where she didn't ever use spells that were doing that. And again, like this is not me victim blaming at all. This is me just like as an observing fan. Like
Yeah, there was this unfortunate confluence of the character she was trying to play, and she was acting the naivete very well, but in a way that works well for a voice actor. Where, I'm sure I said this in our last episode, even, but like, players narrate what your characters are doing, not just what they say.
Yes.
Narrate their body language. It's, even if you do a crap job of it, it's a great way to point out, this is the difference between me, the player sitting here, and the character. When my voice sounds like this, it's not because my character is actually an asshole, or it's because my character is an asshole. It's not me trying to like abuse you.
Well, maybe a little bit of.
But yeah, I mean, draw those distinctions. And she was new to the hobby, newish to the hobby at that time. And, they had just made this huge shift. She was playing the hardest class. I run like baby's first D&D session stuff through start playing on and off sometimes. But it really is geared toward, like, you've never played any TTRPG, you hardly know what you've even signed up for, but you got 5 buddies and $20 and you're here to try it out. And I don't allow druids.
Yeah.
I don't put them as an option in front of people. Same with warlocks.
Ooh.
And I love druids and warlocks, but there are certain things where there are certain classes where the features and the mechanics have such a burden, and it's not obvious which ones they're going to be. Somebody feeling intimidated by D&D and showing up and being like, well, I kind of like animals, I'll bring that. And I'll be the nature-loving, hippie, magic user who loves animals. That sounds approachable for me. And yeah, it doesn't work out that way.
In this current campaign that I'm running, I feel, I don't want to say sad, but it was sort of unfortunate because there was we've had 3 brand new players that are part of this campaign, 2 of which, when we were explaining to them the classes, druid was like, that's what I want to do. Like, that sounds like the most like what, and it's unfortunate because you don't want to be like, yeah, you're not ready. But like, at the same time, like, there's been several instances in our games where I'm just like, I wish you would have gone with Ranger instead, or I wish you would have just like, and maybe, who knows, like, maybe it's me being judgmental, but at the same time, like, there's just so many things you got to keep track of. There's so many things that you're able to do, and it's literally just trying to drink out of the fire hydrant.
Yeah. And while you can hand somebody, either a character sheet or and like a folder full of spell cards, like they were working with in their early days, they got all of the spell cards and they could read them. But that doesn't mean that it's immediately obvious, in a class where you're given so many options. The druid in 5e doesn't give you a whole lot of clue on like what's a good option for right now. You need to really dig into the rules to figure out, why would I want to pick this wild shape? Why would I want to pick this spell? Just on the surface of a lot of them, they sound like they do one thing and they do something completely different. Windwalk, famously from Critical Role. I mean, it's even in a completely, future arc where they get stuck with that. But that, I feel like that is one of the biggest moments from the actual play where there was friction between people because of, not realizing what a spell did.
Yeah. And I do also think that it's like, it is also unfortunate because one of the just negative sides of D&D that, and I, again, like, I think that we both just have seen, and is that there is just 2 ends of the spectrum of the type of players that are interested into D&D. You get a lot of the people that are very inclusive, very much want to be as uplifting and help each other out. And then there's also people that are just filled with so much anger, so much hate, and they want to just give all that anger and hate to everybody else, and it's just unfortunate because it's I mean, I feel like it's one of those like I feel like D&D is just one of those few things, I shouldn't say few, but it's one of those things where you get that such a wide spectrum. You don't really see that with a lot of other interests and loves, but it's just especially prevalent in D&D. So,
Yeah,
especially
and
with this,
only based on name recognition, not based on, almost nobody picks D&D for their first game based on it having, traits that make it good for a newcomer.
yeah.
That's not what happens. It's because it's like Kleenex. We use it as a shorthand for an entire brand of thing, for an entire product.
Yeah.
And like from the inside of this world, I just want to take every single new player and shake them and say, play anything else. Anything else. You would be so much happier with anything else. That's not to say that there's no place for this. I think that 5e is a very flexible version of D&D. It lets you do a lot of stuff that you couldn't in older editions, but it is a very specific thing for somebody who's looking for a very specific thing. And the unfortunate state of the community is that anybody who even knows what a 20-sided die is, 9 times out of 10, they only know D&D 5th edition. Whether
I mean,
that's what they would enjoy the most or not.
I mean, there's a reason that a lot of these like nerdy tattoo shops, D20 is one of the most popular things that they tattoo onto people.
Yeah,
And
that becomes a shorthand for literally D&D.
yeah,
As opposed to, I feel like Daggerheart is what Critical Role should have switched, like in the craziest alternate universe or somewhere with time travel or some bullshit. If they had been able to transfer their characters from their home game into Daggerheart, I think that Liam would have had less fun. Matt would have probably known what he was doing a little bit less, and every other player would have had a better time.
yeah. I
Certainly,
mean,
Keyleth would work better in a less rules forward system.
yeah. I mean, it's just so fascinating to see that, and I don't know. It's I agree, D&D, it's the gateway drug into other TTRPGs, and it has its place. And and it's I think it's also just so because there's been some of the games that we've played that I've enjoyed, but there's something about just the level of customization that in particular, and that's why I loved Pathfinder, because Pathfinder is like the very definition of
Exactly.
customization. Like
Yeah.
but at the same time, you can only do so much before you drive yourself insane for
Yeah.
customization.
Yeah,
But
and that comes with a higher barrier to entry and whatnot.
exactly.
But it's, the TTRPG community is in the unfortunate circumstance where, or situation where, you just use the term gateway drug. I mean, we talk about weed being the gateway drug, maybe the least harmful of all things that we talk about being drugs. If the
yeah.
TTRPG community were actual drugs, we would be talking about the gateway drug being meth,
Because one hell of a drug it is.
Exactly. And you would get the same thing. You would get 9 out of 10 people who try it never doing anything else, because why would they? It's meth.
The gateway drug, heroin.
I
But
started light with crack, and then I tried out weed, and I wasn't really impressed because it wasn't very strong.
so I went back to crack.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's funny, but I genuinely think that is so true for the situation that we're in.
But do you think it's just because D&D has just done such a better job on marketing themselves, or do you think that it's
It
like
has been the one and only biggest name in the entire sphere since the beginning. I mean, it's a position that it has lost to some extent at times. I don't know what their market share looked like in the early mid 2000s, with 4th edition when they really suffered to Pathfinder and stuff like that. but there were still a lot of people playing 4th edition. There are always diehards, and what D&D can claim is they were the first. They coined this whole thing, and they carry that legacy, but then it sort of gets conflated with being, the default example of this thing, where it's really specialized in kind of like tickling everybody's fancy in various different ways, and holding on to that like historical tradition while also doing some things differently. But if I were making a new TTRPG today and I were going for the same people who enjoy D&D, I wouldn't be making a crunchy tactical game. I wouldn't be making a game with, the classes are iconic parts of it, and the alignment charts and the worlds. These are what is iconic about D&D itself. But then the rules, the role play, the balance sometimes matches up with that, and sometimes doesn't.
Well, there's literally only been one TTRPG that I feel like even has come close to matching. I don't even say matching, but potentially come up and threaten D&D, and that was Daggerheart, because they had done such a great job
Yeah.
of marketing it and
Yeah.
talking it up. And I still am wondering why they decided to go back to
Mhm.
D&D for campaign 4, because it's so weird to me that you
Yeah.
make this entire game, you market it for so long, and you go back to
Yeah. Honestly, you, me, and the entire community are thinking about that.
the only thing I can think is that D&D gave them an outrageous amount of money to continue doing it,
Maybe.
which
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I suspect that Critical Role, just in terms of revenue, is comparable in size to D&D, to the D&D division of Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, etc. D&D is small change for Hasbro. It's small change for Wizards of the Coast compared to Magic the Gathering. And you compare the number of people working for them, the annual revenue. Critical Role, it's within an order of magnitude at the very least. I'm sure they are nearly as big as D&D at this point. If I had to guess why they did that, it's just because, once again, this hurts me to say, but so much of the community would probably have abandoned them if they changed their system.
and again, this might be my controversial opinion. Don't worry, guys, we'll get back to the show in a second. But
Slaying some hot takes here.
slaying some hot takes. That's all we
Steamy
do.
ones.
I think that I know that I'm not alone in, I don't even want to say being turned off, but like campaign 3 just really, I struggled to get into it. I genuinely struggled to get into campaign 3, and I know that I'm not alone in that. So the people that stayed for the entire duration of campaign 3, I don't think that they would go away just because they switch. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
there because they love the cast. They love
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing. And I don't know. I just don't see them deciding to leave just because they're switching systems. And who knows? Maybe there might be a chunk of them that decide to do that. But we also have to consider maybe Brandon Lee Mulligan didn't want to be a
Yeah.
DM for Daggerheart, which,
Yeah.
like, as much as I love Matt Mercer and I think Matt Mercer is god tier, like, Brandon Lee Mulligan is just as good in his own ways as Matt, in my opinion.
Yeah, I genuinely think he is a genius, and he is very much on the record saying that he feels no desire to play anything other than 5e. Like, he will run other games, obviously, has on Dimension 20, but he's very much on the record saying that he thinks that 5e is perfectly capable of telling any story he wants to tell. So that could have been part of it, his comfort level. I suspect that part of it is purely financial, purely, backroom deals. Maybe WotC just didn't want any sign of Critical Role leaving them in the dust, because that's the single worst thing that could happen to them.
Yeah.
They very likely could have paid a bunch of money just so that isn't something that people are talking about.
Well, I know we talked about it when we were talking about Delicious in Dungeon, and I don't want us to have to rehash this whole
Mm-hmm.
conversation, but Critical Role saved
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Literally brought it back from the dead. Like D&D was, I'm not going to say it was that it's cool now, but it's like socially acceptable to talk about
Mm-hmm.
that you play Dungeons and Dragons. Back in the like even just 10 years ago, it was sort of like weird. Like and really like you're like, "Oh, you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Mm-hmm.
Okay."
Exactly.
Not only has Critical Role changed that, but they've literally gotten some of the biggest, like they've gotten literal stars to come and join them and play. They've gotten Hollywood hotties to come in
Yeah.
and play and like just expose that like, hey, this is a game for everyone. Like there's been weird propaganda against it, but that's all it is weird propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, the last decade, what a time for D&D.
Yeah.
I mean, 5e again was kind of what they needed for the time that it came out. Critical Role was there for anybody who got the bug and wanted to jump in and see more of it. They didn't have to buy any books, just get on YouTube. Watch these, really like charismatic people play, fall in love with the characters. And we had Stranger Things being so many people's first introduction. There's a very, very good reason why it is still Wizards of the Coast's like current plan to keep leaning on Stranger Things. And then you throw a pandemic in there. And a bunch of people suddenly have to stay home and want to socialize over Zoom. And it's a good thing to do if Zoom is all you've got. So like they had such a decade. And I feel like they would be idiots at Wizards of the Coast to let Critical Role play anything else.
For sure.
I think they would be making only a very good business move if they wrote as big of a check as they possibly could. So there's a possible reason. I think the players' familiarity with a new system is a possible reason. I think maybe they didn't want to pin all of their hopes on the new thing. Maybe internally they were hedging a little bit and not wanting to, worry that like if Daggerheart shows up with some flaw that they couldn't foresee, which happens with every RPG, every single one. You never know how an RPG is going to play until it's public. There's a lot that could have gone into that decision. Doesn't make me less disappointed with the decision.
Well, and I think that that's a big reason that again, Critical Role will always have a special place in my heart. I obviously
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about this show right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I do genuinely believe in the past 2, maybe even 3 years, you can almost feel the corporatization of Critical Role. It's more than just friends playing D&D together.
Yeah.
And
It has been for years, and they were able to hold on to that vibe for an impressive amount of time.
yeah,
But the simple fact is they are paying so many people's salaries at this point
it's a
that they
media empire.
yeah, they have to make decisions in a different way. It can't be, big risks, mom and pop stuff
Yeah.
anymore.
I don't know if
So,
it's the case still, but I know at one point they were the number one revenue
yeah.
generator on Twitch. Like
Yes.
that,
By a surprising margin too.
yeah,
Uh
it wasn't even close. Like, wasn't it like $8 to $10 million a month that they were generating? Like,
Yeah, and that's back in campaign 2 days even.
yeah,
That's when Twitch released this and it was a huge headline because even people who talked about Twitch a lot didn't seem to know Critical Role. It was just that, there was Critical Role and then the whole rest of Twitch. And the Twitch community didn't realize that actually the biggest channel are these goofy voice actors from a bunch of anime shows and video games playing D&D. It was a news flash to everyone.
yeah. Well, again, before we get sucked down even more,
Yep.
let's
Yep.
let's go ahead and wrap up this episode here, and then we'll jump into the next one. But
Yeah. I just have to bring up Laudna.
Laudna.
Laudna's here in this episode, just
Laudna's
for a
here.
few frames. But
Is she the little girl?
not the little girl. She is like a I don't know, a dark-haired, kind of olive-skinned woman. They found like a little girl to be Pike, and they found a big dude to be Grog, and they found just like a woman with dark hair to be Vex, and that is who would eventually become Laudna.
I did not. See, I know enough from spoilers, spoiler alert, that Laudna is very much like tied to the Whitestone storyline. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's possessed. Doesn't she have like part of Delilah's soul trapped in
Yeah.
her or something like like
Yeah.
all sorts of fun stuff like that. All hearted conversations.
Yeah.
Does
I'm
definitely
actually, I'm currently listening to the audiobook of basically Laudna's backstory that they released.
really.
And, anyone who is really, really into these characters, I do recommend it. If you don't know Critical Role, I'm not sure it's going to be a perfect entry point. But anyway, it is just about her going from waking up, in a noose in the Sun Tree. And that is Laudna's first moment.
Like,
And
how
not
did I get
remembering
here?
her life from before. So, like, we're actually just seeing, like, her body.
Well, speaking of seeing her body, we'll bring that up.
Great transition, Bryce.
The caravan is attacked by undead abomination hounds with extended jaws and tentacles. During the fight, Scanlan is subjected to torture movements from the tentacles. In the chaos, the cart is carrying all their expensive vampire hunting supplies and it goes over a cliff, all for nothing loss. That night, as others bonded, Percy lies awake, spinning the barrel of the gun with the list of the 5 names engraved on it. The group arrives to Whitestone to find the legendary Sun Tree. The episode ends with a horrific shot, the tree used as gallows, with peasants, including children, hung from its branches, dressed as perfect replicas of Vox Machina's clothing. And I just have to say, like, with that scene in particular, it like is so dark, but goes
Yeah.
so hard. And it's like
Yeah.
easily like I go back and forth. Like I know Matt is such a gentle, kind person, but there's some darkness in this man.
Yep.
There's some
Yep.
darkness in this man with
What a
the
moment. And this is one of those very few things where we can point to it and say, this was Matt. This was 100% him. And what a move. What an introduction to Whitestone is almost like a gigantic dungeon and just a sequence of increasingly difficult combat encounters. Yeah, okay, it's gothic horror themed, but the Sun Tree and the hangings are where he shows who their enemies are.
and
So brilliant.
exactly. And I think that this is the first time, even in the campaign, that they're dealing with enemies that are truly evil. Because up to this point, even when they were in the Underdark, you can make the I don't want to say excuse, but you can say the Illithid and the Duragar are evil, but that's more just with their circumstances and how the characters are built up. These characters in Whitestone are evil people. They are
Yeah.
not good. And I think that, and again, like I would love to explore this conversation more, but we also need to get through this episode eventually. But I really think that because Matt made them so evil, our view, because I always had a rosy colored glasses of Percy. It wasn't until I watched the show that I realized like Percy's not a good guy, which I don't know if that says more about me than anything else.
Or at the
But
very
like
least, if he was ever good, he's not anymore.
exactly.
Or he
But
isn't right now.
But because you see the Briarwoods and the people working for the Briarwoods being so evil, it's easy to just like almost justify or brush off what Percy does because it's nowhere near as horrific as
Yeah.
what the Briarwoods are doing.
Yeah, they Delilah in particular revels in causing pain and terror, and putting that against Percy. Absolutely, it gives him the ability to be the good guy here.
Yeah.
Which, that's a risk sometimes, especially with like a revenge arc. Another good GMing tip or storytelling tip: if you want a good revenge arc, you've got to make the bad guys deserve it, unless you're specifically going into a revenge is bad arc. And if you want to do that, make sure your players are on board. You can really disappoint some people.
Real quick, Colby, we do have a comment in the chat right here. I'm a Snoop Dogg is asking, where can I watch this show? It is on Amazon Prime. You can watch the show. Legend of Vox Machina is on. It's on Amazon Prime. We're right now talking about episode 5 and episode 6. If you love fantasy, go ahead and check it out. It's a great show. Like we mentioned last week, the first 2 episodes are a little goofy, but if you like goofy, it's there. It doesn't get dark until we get here,
Very
because
much gets dark.
well, isn't that just crazy to think though, Colby? Like literally not even 2 episodes ago they were doing what they were doing with General Krieg, and now there's literal children being hung from a tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, like I love dark fantasy. I feel like that is very well known, and even I was just like, I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it has a copyright or an MO particularly that shows up over and over again. It's that somebody in their group will say, "Wouldn't it be funny if we did X?" And it will happen. They'll make it happen one way or another. And that is true for like how dark can we go? That's true for how silly and goofy can we go? I guarantee that's how we got Scanlan and his tentacle encounter in this episode.
Yes.
Like, was that necessary? No, we already get what Scanlan's like, but somebody in the writer's room said, wouldn't it be funny if, and that means they have to do it.
Yes. I'm a Snoop Dogg is also asking if there's anything that is that is similar to this show, which I think that's a good question just to be asking in
Mm-hmm.
general, Colby. Right off the top, I think that it's almost a blend of the Dragon Prince and Castlevania. Like it
Yeah.
has that level of lightheartedness at points that the Dragon Prince has, but it has that level of darkness and gore and fighting that Castlevania has.
Yeah, I don't know the Dragon Prince, but yeah, it's in my mind, Castlevania definitely comes up for setting and for the levels of darkness you get to. I also, even though it's a completely different show in every single way, I also tend to think of Cyberpunk Edge Runners just for kind of like a they've got a style and they are going for it and they don't give a shit if you like it or not, kind of.
I think Cyberpunk is very much the
Mm-hmm.
most similar show because it has very similar humor at times. It has the same amount of graphic and gore in it. And I mean, I just feel like this is definitely more of an American animation while Cyberpunk is definitely more anime.
Yeah,
So I'm a
absolutely.
Snoop Dogg. If you've seen Cyberpunk, that's a good reference. If you've seen Castlevania, I think that's an okay reference. It's if you have Amazon Prime, I'd go and check it out. Each episode's only 20 minutes long. We just make it seem like the show's 12 hours long because we
We have far too many opinions about this.
us opinionated. Nah. Now, I just really did enjoy this episode in particular because yes, there was a lot of world building and a lot of development in the characters, but I also just think that it's did a good job of just setting the tone of what the rest of the season was going to be like because Iman and Whitestone are just 2 very, very different areas. And even, like, in the campaign where, like, there's some points where Taliesin starts talking about the lore of Whitestone,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Where do you like, did we actually get rid of the evil villains when we took out the Briarwoods, or is the de Rolo family actually some evil motherfuckers?" Because, like, he
Yeah.
was straight up talking about, like, how they're like, "We would assign the soldiers to live with a dog for a year, and then we'd have the soldiers kill the dog." What? What are you doing, Percy?
Yeah. I mean, that's just a great example of, I think, what Taliesin was going for with this whole part of the character is that Percy is somebody who looked into the dark too far.
Yeah.
He stared into the darkness and he became the monster. And he's going to be struggling for the rest of his life. And you can argue that he doesn't struggle. Everything we see Percy do from here on out, he is as ruthless as the de Rolos made him. And he kind of never turns his back on that.
Yeah, I mean, he's ruthless, and also he, like, and there's going to be some pivotal moments at the end of the season where he does finally, like, learn to rely on his friends and realize that it is not in his best interest. And I think that this is what I really love about the show is, like, again, like, I when I first watched it, I didn't like it because it's different from what the campaign was, but I think it's more realistic because he does just look so deep into that darkness where I don't think, and again, nothing against Taliesin and how he was playing it, but I don't think that it was really relayed as well without a visual representation of what's going on.
Yes.
And I mean, again, I'm so excited to talk about it all,
Yeah, absolutely.
but if it's all right
But
with you, I'd love.
there's
Oh, go
more
ahead.
opportunities for that.
Yes, yes, there are. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into this last episode, and I'm just actually going to break it all down, and we'll go ahead and just talk about what we want to talk about from there. Episode 6, Sparks of Rebellion. Whitestone is revealed as a desolate, oppressed city under the Briarwoods' rule. The group meets Keeper Yennon, who connects them with a small rebellion. They learn the rebel leader, Archie, has been captured and is going to be executed. Vax, Scanlan, and Percy attempt to infiltrate the prison. Their plan is an epic fail from the start, with the gag of a problematic door from the original stream. Vax's lockpicking fails, Scanlan's Big B's foot spell does nothing, and Percy falls from a window when he tries to climb. The only thing that gets them in is when the guard opens and dumps a chamber pot on them. Inside, Vex provides a distraction by blowing a kiss to the guard so Grog could sneak up and knock him out. They find Archie being tortured, having had his ear ripped off. Grog suggests a murder. Grog suggests a murder is the best solution of a plan. Kill everybody, including Archie, to the rescue. The team is cornered by Captain Stornfell. Percy stays behind to confront him while when Percy removes his mask, Stonefell, as an oh crap moment, recognizes him as a de Rolo. As he fights, Percy is consumed by Orthax's influence, his eyes turning black, emitting smoke. He brutally executes Stonefell and his name vanishes from his gun. Percy has considered Stonefell not worth killing compared to the other remaining targets, but kills him anyways. The team escapes with the rebels and burns the prison. Archie reveals that Percy's sister, Cassandra, is still alive and held with the Briarwoods. Now, again, such a really good episode, and I think I need to apologize to Critical Role because last week I was talking about how I wish they would have just kept the door scene in the original sense, and they sort of did because like this is the scene they just decided to add the other door scene in for kicks and giggles. And I think that they actually spliced this perfectly while showing Vex and Grog going all like commando mode in there, just breaking
Mm-hmm.
into their while they're
Well,
doing literally everything
yeah,
to get it.
absolutely. Well, and also just the fact that they needed to set this up, earlier in the series to make it clear that like they've got a thing about doors.
Yes.
And this is where it really kicks their ass. I do think that that's just kind of it's a setup and payoff thing where the payoff works really, really well. The setup kind of struggles to earn its own airtime, but needs to be there for sure.
Yeah. Now, I know that there's been conversation, and I think we've even had this conversation that one of the downsides of 5e is that classes like a rogue, it doesn't make sense that a rogue would fail a lock picking check or
Uh,
something along those lines. And while I tend to agree where as a player it might be disheartening to see like, okay, you are purposely playing this character to do this one thing. Why does it make sense for them to fail? But I also think it creates these sort of just amazing moments like this where you see Vax just roll a natural one and he fails. And I think it's just awesome to see like how do you play off these failures. And I think that Scanlan and Travis, I know the scene doesn't involve Travis, but it does involve Scanlan, but they're both, in my opinion, the best at playing off their failures and
yes,
making it just as fun
yes,
as they're playing off
absolutely.
their successes.
Yeah, yeah. I think Travis, I don't know what it is about that guy, but he seemed to be perfect at this from day one. He is very, very good at playing not only the butt of the joke, but in a very relatable way. Whereas Scanlan is more of the like straight up goofball. But yeah, I absolutely agree that this is one of those moments that would not show up in a show that wasn't based on D&D. And this is one of those great opportunities for them to do an inside joke and be like, hey, this thing, this only happens because D&D. This makes
Well,
absolutely no sense otherwise.
well, even Percy falling off of the roof, like trying to go through a window, because I'm pretty sure that's what happens in it as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. And other systems have different ways around this. Like Dungeon Crawl Classics is one of my favorites in that any character can try to do this roll, but rogues get plus 10 to it. Just a straight plus 10. And with the dice math of that system, that's a very nearly guaranteed success. There are systems that give you things that are just kind of listed on your sheet and say, this is something that your character is very, very good at and will never fail at. And, in terms of creating realistic situations, that can be better. But you're right that there is a charm. There's almost an important part of getting into D&D is seeing these situations where the wizard can't read the runes, the barbarian walks up, the barbarian who can't read anything, the languages he actually understands, walks up, scritches his head, says, oh, it means this, and this. And everybody's like, how did you know that? He says, where was I? What was happening? It's a core experience of playing RPGs. And um I think it's one of those things where like you don't want to make it go away. You don't want to make that never happen. I think that you also let it happen too often at your peril, because if it happens all the time, if you're asking for rolls all the time, then people are going to roll natural ones. It's just going to happen. The
Yeah.
more times you call for a roll, the more likely it is that somebody's going to embarrass themselves. And if you're doing that a lot, you can erode the feeling of, why would you play Vax if he fails to do the one thing he's supposed to do, a significant portion of the time.
I see, and I completely agree with that sentiment. And something that I've actually seen myself taking, and I think that there's a lot of things that Baldur's Gate 3 does that I
Yes,
wish would be adapted over to just regular play styles.
I
Jumping
absolutely
for
agree.
one. Jumping and shoving are just two things that are
Oh, for sure. I think that like the verticality of maps in Baldur's Gate 3 is hard to do for in some like tabletop situations, but how useful those types of movement become, so cool, so new, so important. And how they, what I suspect you were getting at, is how they deal with inspiration in Baldur's Gate 3. Just
yes.
giving you a do-over button that you can use a number of times.
And not only giving a do-over button, but it's, and again, like I know you are really good at doing inspiration. I struggle as a DM to do inspiration.
I
I
always
jokingly
struggled.
say that my players never do anything worth inspiration. But I say that out of love, though.
But yeah, I mean, it's a common thing that DMs are not awarding inspiration all that often because the 2024 rules came out with a bunch of new ways that don't require the DM's input for characters to get inspiration. Clearly that was I've run entire multi-year campaigns where I was like, you can just ignore that part of your character sheet. I don't do inspiration.
Yeah. Well, and also something that I really love that Baldur's Gate 3 does, and I love about the inspiration, but I also really love that, and again, maybe you might disagree on it, but I do like that they're like the amount of rolls that they do have you do, but they'll give you like you have to roll. You can't roll a one. One is all you can. You can literally roll a two and
Yeah.
you still pass it.
Yeah.
And like I think there's at least a time and place for it because I mean, maybe it's just table to table because, like, with my current table, I feel confident enough that if they were to fail something that you're like, how did you fail that they would be able to laugh it off rather than be able to get mad. But at the same time, like, I totally agree where it's like, it can be just so disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
remember when I first started playing Brant, like, that was Brant is one of my favorite characters I've ever played.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, he was one of the worst characters for the longest time. Like his stats were not good.
Huh?
And like the one thing I was supposed to be good at was fighting. And there were so many times that I was a tank. I'd take all the hits, but I
Uh-huh.
couldn't deal any damage. And it just was like,
Huh?
oh, what do I do?
Yeah, and I mean that certainly changed, but it changed when the game got into its prime.
Yes.
And yeah, this is a great inspiration is a great example of what I've been harping on all night about 5e putting too much of the burden on the GM to award it, to remember to award it when you're having to remember all of these other things. There's the plot, which is plenty complicated. There's all the rules, which is plenty complicated. You're not going to remember to say, hey, that was a great moment of role playing. When your players are role playing, you are like, oh, thank God. Now I can stop and think what the hell I'm going to do here for a second. I'm not going to listen to my players. I'm not going to grade their role playing right now.
Well, since we're on the subject of it, I do actually want to bring up as well one group that I watch religiously now that I genuinely enjoy, and I think I brought this up last time, is I love Legends of Evantris, particularly the Witchlight, and I love their twists of dread or their twists of fate that they do. I think that is I want to introduce that so badly because one, I think it adds an amazing just role playing aspect to it. But I think it also allows us to sort of overcome this issue that we're running in. Like, hey, it really doesn't make sense that we're failing this right now. Let's go ahead and just roll the dice with it. I don't care if my knees are glued together.
Yeah. Yeah, there are times to let the dice tell the story, and there are times when that really would throw too much of a monkey wrench into things. And yes, it is a good skill for a game master of any game to get used to. It's often called failing forward. How do I deal with a character who should have been able to do this easy suddenly failing at it? How do I keep the story rolling? That is an important skill. But yeah, it is a lot of burden if you just let the dice tell the story. The dice will only ever tell you a random story. I think that this hobby isn't good because of the dice. The hobby is good because of the reactions to the situations the dice put you in.
Exactly.
And that's why the door incident is funny. It's not because of the failure, it's because of the comedy that they played out of it. And that's what they're professional actors. Of course they're gonna be able to deal with that pretty
Well, so it's funny you say that because I think this is a good segue into something that I wanted to discuss as well. Of all the plans that were pitched forward, isn't it ironic that Grog's was the most accurate to what actually happened?
Yeah. And once again, in story, very ironic. Out of story, the way that D&D parties typically comport themselves, it's about right. Put yourself in situation, batter your way back out.
It's like we go in and we kill everybody.
Yeah, I cannot say that I have ever run a campaign where the party were not chaos gremlins.
Yeah.
To some extent. That's just kind of what D&D does well.
And especially for me, when I play RPG video games, like, I hate the stealthy missions. Like, whenever you fail by getting caught, because I never make stealthy characters.
Mhm.
Shocker. I know this is going to be a real shock to you, Colby. I always build the big tanky characters.
What?
That wear heavy armor, they have a shield, and they one-hand, two-handed weapon over here. Shocker. So, like, when these stealth missions come up, I'm like, all right, I guess I have to take off all my armor. I've got to put on these.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many times, like, when stealth is optional, I'm like, oh, it's optional? All right. Just break down the front door and just. So,
yeah.
I mean, again, like, we laughed and they brushed off that idea, but that's literally what they went with, because, like, all the guards knew that they were in there and they had to just slaughter their way through the prison.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, part of that is because of just how stealth works in D&D. That's the situation you end up in if you're playing it rules as written. If the DM isn't doing something to make it feel more like Metal Gear Solid, it will always feel like Grog and the rest smashing their way through a bunch of people and blood and gore everywhere. I think that it's fun to watch it manifest in this game, but honestly, it also constantly frustrates me. Because I disagree with Brennan Lee Mulligan. I do think you can tell any story you want with 5e, or with a role-playing game for that matter. It's just a matter of how much duct tape you need. And yeah.
I think is it Blades in the Dark that we did the campaign of? That like, that's one of the games that I've actually enjoyed the most, that we experimented and played off, because there's still, like, it's very much a role play heavy game, and there was aspects of it, because in D&D we always, like, whoever says they don't retcon, they lie. Everyone retcons in D&D.
Everyone retcons a lot of stuff.
In Blades in the Dark, there's literally a retcon mechanic, which I loved that aspect, where it was, you were literally role playing like a memory or something like that.
Yeah, well, and it's something you see in every single TTRPG. There's always some mechanic that's designed specifically for players or the DM to reach into the world and just change something they don't like. Blades in the Dark is almost entirely based around that in such a brilliant way. And all the time I kind of like think to myself, like, is there a real RPG that exists that would be the perfect thing for new players who want to try the fantasy game that they saw in Stranger Things, but don't play Warhammer? D&D is a very approachable game if you're a Warhammer player. If you're not, then you're going to be kind of shocked. And Blades in the Dark, a fantasy, like dungeon crawling version of Blades in the Dark, would be the closest I would think of that, because you know, it is designed around giving the players in particular lots of tools to reach into the world and say, actually, I already have a way to overcome this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's one of my favorite games in the entire world. I think that anyone who has played D&D, who likes D&D, should try it for at least 6 sessions, because it takes some time to get used to it. It's so different.
It's so different. It's so weird, but it was just so fun. And I mean, especially if you look, because at least the version we were playing, it's like that steampunk version. And I know that that's a really popular genre there. So if you are looking for something that is a lot more family friendly, definitely not family.
Absolutely not. D&D is safer than Blades in the Dark, I'll tell you that.
User friendly. We're trying to steal drugs to like start our own drug empire.
Yeah. So I've run at this point 3 separate campaigns of Blades in the Dark. One of them, you guys were trying to build a drug empire. That was the most straightforward one. I have had a group who created a group of assassins, and it's good. It's one of those situations where there were only 3 of us. All of us were completely fine with any level of violence and darkness in this game, and they went for it. They challenged that assertion that we would be fine with anything, and they were the darkest, most violent, most horrifying people I've ever seen. And then I had one group who started a cult, and most of our sessions were about them like setting up like tax loopholes, and it was still just as fun, like a cult setting up like a 503c foundation. I shit you not, that's what comes out of Blades in the Dark.
Yeah, I mean, like, I did genuinely enjoy it, and like, I will say, I think maybe we just didn't explore it enough. I do think I enjoy D&D's combat element a little bit more than Blades in the Dark. But when it comes to like actual storytelling, I think Blades in the Dark does such a better job than
So the thing that gets people into TTRPGs most often is, they show up because it looked fun on Stranger Things, but the thing that hooks people is this idea that you can be given this situation, and then what people say is you can do anything. Obviously, that's a complicated statement, but Blades in the Dark is the closest to that statement being 100% true.
Yeah.
It literally is just whatever you narrate is what happens, and then the GM tells you what are the consequences to that.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. It's just...
You can try anything you want. Everyone's the same color on the inside, though, so...
It's the old proverb, fuck around and find out.
Exactly. That's what that game is for, and basically all of the levers it gives players to push and pull are about getting yourself into trouble and then getting back out of it. And repeat. Whereas the levers that D&D gives you as a player are, how do you prepare for a situation? What do you do with your action? What do you do with your movement? It gets very granular. And Blades in the Dark is completely the opposite. Everything is handled by a single roll. So it's obviously a very, very different kind. It's not going to be for everyone.
No,
for sure.
I do think if you genuinely do enjoy D&D and are just trying to experiment with other TTRPGs, it's probably the best one to try out first.
Especially if you like heists. If you like the look and feel of the Dishonored franchise of games, you have to try that out. And especially, even if you don't care about heists in particular, if you play D&D and you feel like it's the mechanics constantly telling you what you can't do, try out Blades in the Dark. It's possible that, it's possible that you need different mechanics. It's also possible that you just need less.
Yeah. This episode brought to you by Blades.
John Harper, you owe me.
Well, is there anything else that we want to talk about with actually Legend of Vox Machina before we wrap up?
Let's see. We talked about Door. I think this is
really haven't talked about Percy's Dark.
Yeah,
because that's where we really we saw the darkness appear, but we see the mask, we see the hints of Orthax, and we even see Percy train his gun on Vax right after, just showing that there's clearly something going on there. Sure, you can make the excuse of hey, this is somebody going through a PTSD episode with a gun, but
is that.
It is. There's just demons involved, real and figurative.
Yeah, but what you're talking about is an enormously important character moment for Percy. Yes. And I guess, spoiler for our next episode, the next section of 3, the next episode after this kind of rehashes the same ground because it's so important. It shows you the background of this character, even though you know what's going to happen to him. And yeah, I think that where this episode succeeds is those character moments. This is where, if you know nothing about Critical Role and you're just watching so far, you're like, oh, I get it now. Percy is the anime protagonist. Oh, he's kind of messed up. This is where you finally see all of him, including the messed up parts and the cool parts. I mean, how iconic is putting the names of the people putting your list on the barrels of your gun.
Yeah.
I think that is just a concept that hits so hard, and we can blame nobody but Taliesin Jaffe for it.
Especially where it burns off when they
Yeah.
actually, like, that is so, like,
Yeah, that just shows you he has been using these guns on dragons and illithids and whatnot, and this has always been there, in Percy's mind. I think it's such a moment, and it's almost a shame how fast the show still has to pass over it,
yeah,
even
I
though
mean,
it covers it in 2 episodes.
like, in particular, like, going back to Critical Role, when this occurred in Critical Role, it was another, like, I think that's, again, why the Briarwood arc was so iconic. Like, yes, vampires are always gonna be a big draw, but there was so many moments, like, the dice just allowed this to happen where Percy got the kill on Stonewall,
Yes.
and just the way he rolled, like, the way Taliesin role played that was just to perfection. Because he was both like stone cold killer, but also like traumatic. Like it's the, I shouldn't say ironic. It's like you can see the trapped boy that the Briarwoods, like the scared boy who's just trying to seek revenge, but you also just see the demon that they created just unleash. And Taliesin just did such an amazing job of just
Yeah.
portraying that. And I could not be happier with how this was animated and put on screen with their deaths in particular, with his death in particular.
I
All right.
remember watching this on the live stream, and this is also one of those moments where, I was new to D&D at the time when this was first coming out, and I was learning the game, and the interpersonal rules around the game are actually some of the hardest parts of any TTRPG. And this is one of those moments where I remember feeling uncomfortable with what he was saying he was doing, and looking at the discomfort on the other cast members' faces and thinking, is this okay? This is one of those moments it hits so hard. And I have to give the advice, if you're a player and you want something similar, don't. You're not Taliesin Jaffe. Or at least if you're not very, very confident that you know what goes into a moment like this and how to make it comfortable for everyone at the table, don't. Because this is one of those moments where, like, the sort of torture he was inflicting is something that I normally ban from my games.
Yeah.
But it's so important, and it makes so much sense.
And that, I again, like, I couldn't agree more, because I know that there's so much of the desire to be the edgy character or just to have that moment and revel in it and just bleed out that darkness. But at the same time, like, they're like, what Percy is doing is evil. And I feel like so many times, like, people are not playing a character as an evil character. They're thinking that they're just extracting justice but getting a sweet tinge of revenge. While Taliesin knows that this is pure revenge. This is just purely for him. He's not doing this for
Hmm?
his family. He's not doing this for his parents. He's not doing this for his people. He's doing this for Percy.
Yeah.
And I think that the rest of the table understood. I mean, like, don't want to say understood that, but they saw that they trusted Taliesin enough that they knew
Yeah.
Taliesin would not put them through something like.
Exactly. Or at least not for nothing. Or they understood that, they all had boundaries. They all deal in these emotions so commonly, in acting, that they all knew where they would go with it, and things like that, if you're just learning how to play D&D from watching them, you're going to miss the, again, like, the interpersonal frameworks that go into making something like this possible without, ruining the game. It comes with a lot of trust if you're going to do it the way they did, very in the moment, very improvisational, mostly based off trust. Somebody who doesn't have a group that they're so close to, like this one is, if you want to do that, you need to replace those bonds of trust and years of knowing each other and working with each other with very intentional rules and boundaries. So I have ended up kind of like pendulum swinging very far in the opposite direction, and I prefer to err on the side of saying too much, explaining too much, boring my players with explanations of like, this is what this character is feeling, this is why they're doing this, this is not, me like victimizing someone for the fun of it, because for the most part I'm not playing with people who I've known for decades.
Yeah, and I think that is also just so hard because I feel like we have definitely been part of games where we felt comfortable doing that, but
Mm-hmm.
even then, like it's trusting yourself one not to go too deep into that because Taliesin could like as messed up as this sound, Taliesin could have taken that further. Like
Yeah.
he very much
Yeah,
could,
absolutely.
but at the same time, like I think that he took it as the appropriate distance to one show that there is something clearly wrong because I think that it was very appropriate for the character to not just kill him, but to kill him in the
Mm-hmm.
most horrific way that he could comfortably do it in that situation because Taliesin, just like Matt, is trying to tell a story and try like he's almost begging for the other players to catch that Orthax is here.
Yeah.
Taliesin wants Orthax, like that people to figure out about Orthax, but Percy doesn't want
Mm-hmm.
players to find out.
Mm-hmm.
And if he just said, and I shoot him in the head and I say his soul is forfeit, like nobody's gonna pick up on that. Like maybe Marisha's gonna pick up on that, but the way he's like, I shoot his jaw, I shoot him there, and just like completely just
Yeah.
dismantling him. Everyone's like, oh, Percy's never done this before. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is going on? There is something going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's with the Briarwoods coach driver before, where he shoots the guy's hand off, that's, I feel like that's there's something here. This is the moment where you see what it is. And it's
Yes.
something ugly and vengeful and bloodthirsty. And yeah, I actually kind of love that he literally puts the mask on for his mask off moment.
But again, like I love Taliesin for that. That's
Yeah.
so extra. That's
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
so
That's the kind of
Taliesin.
shit he does.
Here's the thing. I'd be so surprised if Taliesin doesn't have a bird mask that he just randomly puts on.
Yeah, that would be a shock to me.
Well, is there anything else that we want to cover in episode 6 or just in the past 3 episodes in general that we didn't get a chance to cover before we wrap up for today?
I'll just say again, like, clearly, this is where the show hits its stride.
Yes.
And if if for some reason you're listening to us talk about this show rather than starting watching it on your own, I will say this is where you should watch to before you make a full decision.
Yes.
If
And I will
like if you can get through episode 2 and you don't absolutely hate it, then keep going. If you get to this point, then you can kind of like say whether this show is fully for you or not and continue with it or not.
I don't want to rehash the whole conversation we had last time, but like again, this is where I am like these past 3 episodes and even episode 3 is why I'm so disappointed in the first 2 episodes because not to say that the first 2 episodes are horrible, but these last 4 episodes are so good.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even seem like it's the same show. Like between the animation, between the story and dialogue, it seems like it's two completely different. It's two completely different storylines, but it just feels
Yeah.
like two completely different stories
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah, and I genuinely, I don't know what I would have done instead of what they did, instead of those, first 2 or 3 episodes. I don't know how I would handle that differently, but because I don't know how you would get that much background info. They had to introduce all of the characters,
Yeah.
where they are, why they work together, how they work together, what each of their powers are. That's an incredible amount of information that you have to introduce. But it ends up being so dense in those 2 episodes that it doesn't work on a story level, and the animation isn't as good. And yeah.
Because you can't do what they did with the comic books and just literally start from the very, very beginning, because, like, let's be real, that would like, it's boring. We don't wanna
Mm-hmm.
go through a like a level 1 storyline. Like, there's a reason that a lot of people, because 'cause didn't they start at level 5 with this new campaign? Like, or
I
is
don't
it level
remember
3?
honestly, but yeah, they and it's a good play with 5e to start your players, start your characters at level 3 or 5, somewhere in the 3 to 5 range, because level 1 and 2 characters are way too squishy and incapable of doing the stuff that the game is based around doing, and later characters are too complex to really jump in easily. So that's why, so many campaigns start there. And that's why this is such a weird campaign that we get our first look at them at level 8
Yeah.
in what's supposed to be the meat of the campaigns. And the actual meat of this campaign takes place at this incredible epic level, is so unusual.
And before we wrap up, I will say that I think that that's, and again, I don't wanna be bashing on Critical Role. I think
mhm.
that that's something that they may have done a little disservice on with this particular campaign, is if you got introduced to Critical Role, if you got introduced to D&D from Critical Role in campaign 1, you're expecting these fights to be these epic, just battle of heroes level things, and being able, but and you're like, wow, that's so cool, I want to go play D&D, and you're like, wait, I can only cast
2
blessing.
spells?
Yeah. I deal 6 damage, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
I mean, the sheer disappointment of somebody who has just created their level 1 wizard,
Mhm.
and you've got 6 spells and 2 spell slots, and you suck at everything else.
Yeah, and literally a sneeze can kill
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you're about as buff as like a pair of kittens, and
Literally the only, like, class that I feel comfortable playing at level 1 and not freaking out is barbarian, and that's just
yeah,
because
yeah.
rage is just so broken that early on in the game.
Mhm. Mhm. And yeah, I mean, I really think that this is such an interesting show, like to such an extent, because of how many forces were acting on this story.
Yes.
And in isolation, if you knew nothing about Critical Role and you just started watching this is going to be an intensely weird show for you. You're going to be like, what are some of these decisions? Why doors? Why do we care so much about doors? What is going on with Pike? Why do
Which
they all respect her so much? I haven't seen her do a goddamn thing for anyone.
which this has been a Pike light episode. I think that
Yeah,
we're going to talk a lot more
yeah,
about Pike next week, which again, like, I really do want to dive more into it, because
exactly. So many, I mean, the filming of The Blind Side, that TV show that I never saw a single episode, but it has such an impact on where the story ends up. The release of fee and their like overcorrection away from the overly tactical fee approach to setting up their rules, the immense history of D&D and having to pay lip service to that. There's just so much that goes into a story like this, and I think that that both makes the story richer, and also it kind of makes it impossible for it to be a smooth ride in my mind.
no,
Like, you don't get into this, you don't even play D&D for one moment to the next. You play it for looking back on where your character ended up and how they got there. Because I mean, the blind paladin in white that Brant became is so much more memorable than the growly fighter who we were initially introduced to.
the tobacco addict.
Exactly. The most interesting thing about him at that point was his addiction.
Hey, isn't that all that's interesting to people?
Yeah. But it's, it's this sort of gestalt that comes together that you can't predict. And if you're coming into this with no context and for some reason listening to us here talk about it, you need to know that's what you're experiencing is
Exactly.
yeah, is just it's like if you go and you live in a really old apartment and you ever chip away at the wall and you see the like 20 layers of paint. That's what you're seeing here.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else that describes that better. And on that note, I think that's where we should wrap up this evening for. We did not have a dragon, so we will not be doing a dragon grade. But next week, we'll be discussing episodes 7, 8, and 9 of Critical Role's Legends of Vox Machina. Colby, thanks for coming on. Do you want to plug anything before we take off for today?
I am still trying to get a couple of things up and running for YouTube. So hopefully you are listening to this sometime in the future and you can go check out Rock, Paper, Science and some of the role playing in my style, which I don't know if you like it. I sure hope you like it.
Go check it out. Like I said, Colby is he'll always be my DM. He'll always be the one who killed me several times. I'm pretty sure Colby has killed me at least 4 or 5 times. I'm not exaggerating.
That's the experience of a DM. We kill you because we love you.
I'm pretty sure there's a passage in the Bible that God says that. But on that note, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, go give Colby a follow, share it with your mom, share it with your dad, share it with your grandma, and we will be back next week. So, good night.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at BigLizPod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.